Hello, and welcome to the launch of a guide on age assessment written and put together by children who've experienced age assessment for other children and young people. Welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Amanda Shah. I'm a policy officer at Greater Manchester Immigration Age Unit. I have to say it feels particularly timely to be having this discussion today, given the media and political obsession over the last few weeks with small numbers of people who've been crossing the channel to come to the UK to claim asylum, and the discussions that have been happening around that about our responsibilities for young people once they arrive in the UK. So I'm going to be joined tonight by different people to have that conversation in the context of age assessments. One of them is on screen with us, but others are going to be joining us by video clip and audio clip. And that's partly because of the obvious reasons why this is an online launch, but it's also partly in recognition that we wanted to make this a safe place for people to share their experiences in a way that made sense for them, particularly the young people who are involved in producing the guide. So I'm joined on screen by Laura Gibbons, who's the Public Law Solicitor at Greater Manchester Immigration Age Unit. We both work at GMIAU, which is a charity that was set up 30 years ago as an anti-racist response to immigration control in Greater Manchester. And as a team, we provide legal services to people across the Northwest who are subjected to immigration control. And what we've noticed is that over the last few years, we've been working with increasing numbers of children and young people. And many of those are in the UK on their own claiming asylum. And a significant number have been subjected to the age assessment process. So I wanted just to kick us off, if I could ask you, Laura, whether you could tell us a bit more about the situations of the children and young people that you particularly work with. You know, where have they come from? What have been their experiences? Why are they here in the UK?
Yeah, so hi everyone, and thank you for joining us. Just by way of a bit of background, I suppose, in terms of what's happening. So last year, in 2019, there were 3,651 unaccompanied children who arrived here in the UK and claimed asylum. And of those young people and those who were age disputed, there were 7 countries that accounted for 86% of those age disputes. So the young people that we tend to see are from Eritrea, Afghanistan, Iran, Sudan, Iraq, Vietnam, and Ethiopia. And of the young people who arrived in the UK, 89% were male. So a large number of those who are age disputed are male. So GMIAU does various different types of work with young people. We've got individual caseworkers and caseworkers supporting them through their asylum claim and representing them. We've also got the All for One group, which is for unaccompanied children between the ages of 14 and 25 who are here living in Greater Manchester. And my role is legal advice and representation for those who have their ages assessed and disputed.
So I know this is what you spend a lot of your days doing, walking alongside young people who are having to go through an age assessment. And I know it's one of the things that keeps you awake at night. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about what we mean when we're talking about age assessment.
Yeah, so many of the young people who arrive in the UK might not have any documentation, no sort of birth certificate, passport, ID, which shows who they are, where they're from, or what their date of birth is. They may never have had a document. They might just be from a country where there is no documentation from birth, no record of it, or they may have lost it on the way to on their journey over to the UK. So without being able, where they don't have documentation to prove how old they are, there is no method that can be used to determine someone's age and date of birth with 100% accuracy. There's no medical test available that you can do to find out when someone was born. So when a young person arrives, if the authorities, so the Home Office or a local authority, don't believe they are the age that they state, they may then carry out an age assessment. So if they, when they first arrive, if the Home Office think they look older than 25, they may then be sent to adult accommodation without any further assessment. If the Home Office or local authorities doubt the young person is the age they say they are, then the local authority may carry out an age assessment. So practices between local authorities across the country vary greatly, but codes of practice and case law established there are some general rules that should be followed, and the most basic ones are that it should be undertaken by 2 qualified and trained social workers who are experienced in undertaking age assessments. There should be an interpreter if needed, and an interpreter that speaks the same language and dialect, which is really important to make sure the young person can actually engage in the age assessment. And there should be someone called an appropriate adult who's there to support the young person and speak up if there's anything wrong during the assessment. And like I say, there's a few sort of guidelines to follow in carrying out age assessments. First of all, one thing is that young people have undertaken often incredibly long, stressful, arduous journeys, and sometimes they're not given the time to recover from those journeys or from what they've been through if an age assessment is carried out as soon as they're arriving into the UK. It's best for the age assessments to take place over different sessions. That's so that the social worker can develop some sort of relationship with the young person, get a rapport going so that they trust them and they feel able to engage and open up. But also so that if there are any inconsistencies or any reasons they may have for thinking that the young person is older than they say, they're then given an opportunity to be able to explain, why that inconsistency is there or what the actual truth is. So essentially an assessment is there, it's a holistic assessment, everything's supposed to be taken into consideration. The young person is supposed to be given an opportunity to say how they know their age and date of birth, and the social workers are there are supposed to consider the evidence in the round, anything from experts, from foster carers, from tutors, people who are supporting the young person, and make sure that the whole process is done in a really child-friendly and sort of non-interrogatory way. And another important point is where there is no definitive evidence, the young person should be afforded the benefit of the doubt. So the reason age assessments are really important, and as you say, keep me up at night, is because it impacts on the care and support and the treatment that someone receives in the UK. So if someone is a child here in the UK, they'll be looked after by the local authority in a foster placement or in supported lodgings, but they'll have someone there looking out for them. If they're an adult, they will be in shared accommodation with other adults, which for a child, it can be a very, very scary and intimidating thing. Someone treated as a child in the UK is able to access mainstream education, so they'll be able to learn English, attend school or college. Also, adults in the UK are liable to be detained, and where someone is deemed to be an adult but is in fact a child, they're at risk of being unlawfully detained. And we have seen that happen in cases where a young person has been age disputed, and eventually with legal support they had their age accepted, but they have been detained in an immigration detention centre before that had taken place. And it also impacts on their asylum claim. An age assessment can delay the whole asylum claim and decision being made, but also a decision is obviously being made on the basis of whether they're a child seeking asylum or an adult. And there are differences in approaches the Home Office will take to that. So it's got really significant implications. So it's extremely important when they are carried out, which shouldn't take place with every young person who's arriving here without documents. But when they are, there is a reason to carry them out. So they're done so carefully, thoroughly, and that the young people going through the process are adequately supported and safeguarded while they're going through that.
Mm. And some of the young people that you work with who've had to endure an age assessment and the consequences of that wanted to speak out about what had happened, how that felt for them, and what they think could have been done better.
Yeah, so when we put together this guide, and we were also talking about how it was going to be launched and what that might look like, we talked about what the young people, how they would want to express what had happened to them and their thoughts and feelings, in addition to the guide and the advice sheets that you'll see. So many of them had not yet been granted refugee status. Some were still in the midst of having their ages disputed, and none had the confidence or the experience to really stand up and speak publicly in person or online. So we had a think, and we decided the best way for them to get their experiences and their views across was by voice recordings and some blog posts. So with the voice recordings in particular, we felt this would allow people to actually hear their voices, hear what they have to say, but make sure it was in a way that was comfortable for them.
And I think we're going to hear one of the young people's voice recordings now. Laura, is there any context that you wanted or the young person wanted to give around this audio clip before we hear it?
Yes, so this young person arrived into the UK alone, originally from Yemen. His age was disputed by the local authority. They did decide to carry out an age assessment, but he was supported by his immigration solicitor and the young people support worker at GMIAU throughout that process. They were there from the beginning. And in his case, thankfully, the outcome was that his age was accepted without the need for any legal challenge. So he didn't have to go to court. The conclusion of the age assessment was that they accepted he was a child. But as you'll hear from his recording, he still found the actual process of the age assessment itself really distressing and stressful for him.
I think we're just working it out. Should say thanks to Max at this point, who was behind the scenes doing technical wizardry to try and make sure that we can hear and see everything we should be during the launch.
My experience about the age assessment, it was not good at all. So when I first came here, I don't know anyone. They just put me in the house with foster care. So I haven't gone to school, I haven't done any activities, nothing. So I just been at home all 4 months. And when I asked for school, they said they want to do for me age assessment before. I just waited for the age assessment until they get me to the age assessment. The age assessment was worried. It was like I've been in stress. So if they didn't believe me, what I'm gonna do? How's my life gonna be? Like everything gonna be changed. They carried out in the age assessment because they didn't believe my age, and they didn't believe me as well. So they just keep questioning me, and it was for 3 days, and actually it was hard for me because every time they keep asking me questions that take me back to the past when I leave my original country. So I came here because there's a war in my country. There's a lot of things going on. I'm not happy to leave my country and leave my families and come here alone and live with like strange people, and everything is difficult. I can't trust him because it's because he doesn't trust me. He didn't believe me. So I can't trust him. it made me feel like worried, stressed, and I just want this to done. So whatever. But I think that if they're gonna like believe me, because I didn't leave my country and my family to come here to lie or to do something else. I come here because I've got war in my country. My life was in dangerous, so everything's been wrong in my life and my country. So I came here. I want to be safe. I want to finish my studies. I want to be like as everyone. The hard was it was 3 days, and the 3 days keeping ask me about like my past. So my families, my dad, my mom, my siblings, everything to remind me by the past. It's really hard to me, because when I remember them, I just get stressed. I feel that I'm like I'm not good without them, or without like everything. First thing, I wasn't have any idea about the age assessment and how it's gonna be and everything. So when I've been to the age assessment in the first session, they explained for me how it's gonna be. But yeah, I get with it. First thing, to believe them, and don't keep asking about the past or about some things like guns every time.
I think that's incredibly powerful. I mean, I listen to that, and what I hear is a child saying, I want to be safe. And really, that's the message at the heart of this guide, isn't it? And the voice of the young people involved in producing it. I know, Laura, you walked alongside the group from All for One when they were putting this guide together. Can you tell us a little bit more about why it was created?
Yeah, so we found that young people were sort of coming to us in various different ways, and one of the ways that we were becoming increasingly aware of was through other young people, and we found that those people who had spoken to other young people about the age assessment process and were able to understand that someone else had been through it and sort of be more aware of what might happen and how to get help, and were then directed to us for help, were a lot more reassured than some other young people that may not have come across anyone else who'd been age disputed. So it was really nice to see, young people helping each other. But what we realised is obviously that not everyone had access to this support, and there are a lot of young people who have been age disputed and dispersed into adult accommodation. So they weren't necessarily coming into contact with any other young people. So we had the idea of, asking those people who had been through the age assessment process about putting together a guide that could then be shared with other young people in the same way, so that they could be reassured, that they could, it could set out what's likely to happen, so they had more of an idea of what to expect, and also how to get help, and just the fact that other people have been through it, and they're not alone. So we put this idea to some of the young people from the All for One group, and they were interested.
And I'm guessing, knowing some of the young people that you've introduced me to, that the process of actually creating this guide involved, I'm guessing, several conversations about cricket and probably a bit of pizza eating.
Yes, definitely. There are some cricket mad fans out there. Tends to be either cricket or football, so it depends. There were quite a few Liverpool fans actually on my side during this session, so that was good. Cricket I have no idea about. And the young people often try and explain to me what it means, and I have to tell them I've got no idea. But we had a few sessions, and we'd already had sort of a more general one, and then we had a specific session with a group of young people to sort of get the content of the guide jotted down. So first of all, in that session, we started off whilst we were waiting for everyone to arrive to get them to draw themselves, and also either an image or some writing about what they hoped they and others will achieve in the future. So some of those drawings you'll see in the age assessment guide as well, which is really nice. So we started off that session, we went through all the different stages of the age assessment process, and then we split into groups with interpreters. We're just talking about the different stages, what happened, who was involved, how it made them feel, and what advice they have for other young people who are going through the same process. So that's what's there in the guide. But what also came out of the sessions was that they didn't just want to support other young people through the process, but they wanted to make it better. They wanted to make the whole process better, and they wanted to do this by telling, the adults and the professionals who are carrying out age assessments or involved in the process, what it was like for them, how it made them feel, and what they could have done that might have made it a little bit better. So it's from that as well as the guide, we created advice sheets for social workers, appropriate adults, and interpreters. So all of that information came out predominantly out of that session. We had some follow-up sessions afterwards, but it was a long session. We had a lot of discussion, and at the end of it was during Ramadan, so by the time it finished, we were just about ready for them to break fast. They all had their mobile phone apps out with slightly varying times when we were allowed to eat. So when all of the alarms had gone off, we had a date to break fast, and then we had some pizza.
And I think those images that you've just mentioned in the guide about the handwritten drawings that were created with hopes, and I jotted down some of them when I was looking at the guide earlier. It's like, I hope everyone gets their dreams, and I hope they achieve their rights. Do you think this is at the core of what the young people involved in those sessions wanted to achieve with the guide?
Yeah, absolutely. They just wanted, it's like the recording, they want to feel safe so that they can then just live their lives and hopefully be able to succeed and achieve things.
So I think we've got a video to share, right? Is that the next thing that we've got coming up?
Yes, so we have a video from Maria. So she's a social worker at GMIAU. She's talking about the guide, how she hopes it will be used by professionals working with young people, and also useful to other young people. And there's just a thank you message to the young people who put the guide together, who we hope are going to be watching this launch and are really proud, as they should be, of the work that they've done.
I'm Maria Houlihan. I'm a social worker with the Greater Manchester Immigration Aid Unit. As part of my role, I work with children and young people who are seeking asylum alone in the UK. And I've worked with children and young people at various stages of the asylum process who've had to undergo an age assessment. Often this is another confusing experience for the young person, with government officials whose intentions aren't clear. The young people who've come to the UK have been through so much, from the events that cause them to leave their home countries, often losing family members on the way, the journey to the UK, and then the actual asylum process. And all of this together it creates a sense of their lives hanging in the balance. So the age assessments, I've sat in some really good age assessments that have been child-centred and supportive and friendly, but equally I've sat in some age assessments that have been quite hostile and intimidating. And so this guide that's been produced by the young people is a fantastic tool to support others who might be going through the same situation. It gives all the information people need about the process of an age assessment, what the outcomes might be, and who's involved. It's also a really great tool for social workers to use to help guide practice and it explains how the young person felt during the age assessment process and what could have been done better to support them. I would hope that organisations and local authorities will use the guide to support young people and help mitigate some of the fears that the young people might be having who've already experienced so much loss and trauma in their lives. And lastly, I'd just like to say thank you to the young people who have taken their time to put the guide together. It really will be helpful for us.
No, thanks for that, Maria. Sorry for the bit of kind of static interference, but hopefully you got the gist of what Maria was trying to say. I think it was really useful actually to hear that kind of social work perspective, because one of the things that struck me looking at the guide is just the enormous array of different adults and different professional roles that young people come into contact with during the age assessment process. I mean, I counted up in the guide itself, they've documented 7 different types of adult professional role. And as well as the guide, am I right in thinking that they wanted to provide some more specific information for some of those particular roles that they felt were particularly important to get right for young people going forward?
Yeah, so there's lots of adults involved, and for someone who's newly arrived into the UK in particular, it's just a really confusing time with lots of different people who they might not know who they are and what their role is. But some of the key people involved in the actual age assessment process are social workers, appropriate adults and interpreters. So as I said, not only did the young people want to produce this guide, but they also wanted those professionals who were involved in the actual age assessment process to hear what they had to say and how things made them feel. So one of the key ones obviously was social workers who were tasked with carrying out the age assessment.
I thought they'd done the amazing job of the social worker one in particular. I just felt like it's such a powerful, short, concise, powerful document that looks at their experiences and their views. And I wondered if some of the kind of strength of what they've created comes from a place of knowing actually that this is a really key role, and that the relationship with social workers and getting that right is pivotal if the age assessment process is going to go well.
Yeah, absolutely. So during an age assessment will normally be conducted by 2 social workers, and they might not be the young person's actual social worker who's tasked with looking after them, and they may be 2 different social workers, or they may be their social worker plus another one. So as we say, because there's no way of determining age with any degree of accuracy, it's the social workers who have this unenviable task of assessing age when it has such important consequences for the young person. So yeah, it was one of the key advice sheets that the young people wanted to put together to really emphasise how important the role is and how much of an impact, you know, a social worker that really takes a child-centred, friendly, holistic approach can make to the whole process, which is never going to be an enjoyable process for a young person, but can be much better and much easier if certain sort of steps are taken.
Whereas the guide itself was written by young people for young people, these advice sheets are written with the particular professions in mind. And I wondered if we could pull up the social work one, and perhaps Laura, you could just flag for us some of the key messages that young people had for social workers when thinking about assessing age.
Yeah, so we put together the key 6 things that came up when we were talking about what they wanted social workers to think about when carrying out an age assessment. The first one was to think about why you're carrying out the age assessment. So this is something that I referred to before. Obviously, age assessment should not be something that's sort of a routine part of a social worker's job. Not every young person who arrives should be being age assessed. It's only where there's a significant reason to doubt the young person's age. So this is really just the young people saying, please think about why you're doing, and do you actually really need to put me through this, is it definitely necessary? Second one, think about the impact an age assessment will have on our relationship. As I said, sometimes it is the social worker who is tasked with looking after the child who carries out the age assessment. Sometimes it's two different social workers. But inevitably, one thing that came up was the issue of trust, and whether they felt, whether they had difficulty trusting the social worker after an age assessment had taken place, even, as you heard in the recording, even where the result was that they accepted the young person's age. Sometimes there's then an issue of trust that continues after that. Think about how our lives are put on hold. So a lot of the time during age assessments, everything seems to be put on hold for the young people: education, their asylum claims, and as you'll see from the quote on the sheets, it can take years, and during which time the thing that came out was they felt as though they'd lost years of their lives and part of their childhood. So the fourth one is think about us as children and treat us like we are. So it's just remembering it needs to be a child-centered approach, not interrogatory. These are young people who, have been through traumatic events, and are children at the end of the day. So, think about how they're likely to engage, and don't make assumptions about the way you think they should be behaving. Think about the experiences we've been through. So as I said, traumatic experiences for some young people that are being relived through questioning. So often age assessments will talk about a young person's family and their background, and some of the young people may have lost some or all of their family members, and it can be really upsetting to have to talk about them and to keep talking about them, as they may have to with the Home Office, with their immigration solicitor, and also if an age assessment's taken place. And the final one was the outcome, the impact. Think about the impact on us if you don't believe our age. So, if someone's age is disputed, they're deemed to be an adult and they're moved into adult accommodation. As I said, they'll be sharing with other adults. And the young people who've been through this would just describe it as lonely, scary, really intimidating. And obviously there's been cases, as I've said, where they've ended up in detention for a period of time until there's been a legal challenge, their age has been accepted. So they wanted to put this guide together for social workers, just to help them understand how it is that they're feeling, and hopefully take that into consideration and guide them in their practice and their role when they're carrying out age assessments.
And the next one, I should probably say at this point that all of these materials are on our website, which is www.gmiau.org. But the next one that they felt like they wanted to focus on probably doesn't come as a surprise for people who are hearing you talk about the range of countries that young people are coming from. But it's about interpreters, isn't it? And perhaps you could just quickly run us through why that's such a key responsibility, I suppose, in age assessments. Yeah,
I suppose it's not always thought of immediately as being the most important role, but actually it's really key. The interpreters are the mouthpiece for the young person. If they can't understand the young person, or the young person can't understand them, then they're not going to be able to properly engage in the age assessment process or be able to answer the questions that the social workers have. And one key problem is if there's any misinterpretation or any elaboration on what the young person is saying that leads to inconsistencies or contradictions later down the line, this might lead to the social workers questioning the credibility of the young person, and ultimately that could be a reason for disbelieving the young person's age. So it was another professional involved in the process that really came out as a key one that young people wanted to say, look, your role is really important, and these are the things we want you to know.
And let's have a look at that. If we could pull that one up, let's have a look at what the key messages were for interpreters from young people given their experiences in age assessment.
So the first one was make sure you speak the same dialect and we can understand each other.
See, that sounds pretty common sense, but it's obviously still a problem, right?
It is. So you may have someone who speaks the same language, but if they come from a different region or a different country, they can't always understand each other. And so it's really important. And the young person may not always feel confident to say something. So it's really important, you know, for the interpreter to make sure that they're understanding each other, and also for the social workers to make sure that they are able to understand each other. The next one is explain things clearly and make sure we can understand. So the social workers should be trying not to use any sort of jargon when they're, you know, during the age assessment process, but sometimes it might be for the interpreters to just, if the young person's struggling to understand, try and, you know, explain what the social worker is asking in a different way, making sure they actually understand what the question is. Use simple words that we can understand easily and take your time. So some of the young people may not have access to any education at all. And so not using, like I said, jargon or any really overcomplicated words that they may not understand will help in making sure that they understand exactly what's being asked of them so they can respond. Make sure you understand what we say before interpreting. So it's, you know, making sure that they interpret each bit, they're understanding it before they're going back to the social worker, so they don't have to come back and clarify and go back and forward. Don't put pressure on us to answer if we don't know. This was one thing that came out a lot in terms of age assessments. A lot of the young people felt pressured into giving an answer if they were asked the same question a lot of times. And even if they didn't know the answer, they felt as though they had to give an answer. Which obviously sometimes cause them problems later down the line. And the last one is listen and interpret what we say, nothing more, nothing less. So like I said, don't elaborate, don't change what's being said, you know, with the risk of causing inconsistencies and problems down the line. They just want you to translate, interpret exactly what they're saying to the social worker, so they've got a record of that. So they seem like very common sense things, but it's just worth taking the time to really think about each of those points, because obviously it's something that has affected these young people in age assessment one way or another.
I think we're going to get a chance now to try and think about these in a more practical context, because we're grateful to Burhan, who does a lot of interpreting at Greater Manchester Immigration Aid Unit, and he's got a video clip he wants to share with us now, talking about his role as an interpreter and particularly what he takes.
Hello, my name is Burhan Fatah. I'm an interpreter, translator by profession. I speak several languages and few dialects. I worked with asylum seekers and refugees for many years. I worked as a volunteer, a caseworker and interpreter. Personally, I fled my country and claimed asylum in the United Kingdom, and I was successful, so I have been through the same journey that most asylum seekers are going through. Throughout my experience working as an interpreter, I gained a lot of knowledge and expertise of how to interpret, to the best of my knowledge, a true and accurate version of the client required and to convey the meaning properly. One part of my job was to interpret for young people who came to the United Kingdom and had no papers, to provide their identities and to prove it. Therefore, they required age assessment. The age assessment is a lengthy and, as clients, young people are saying, boring process that many young asylum seekers might go through. The interpreters might need great skills of the language they interpret for and from. And during the age assessment, an interpreter needs to be prepared to make sure that the interpreter and the young person understand each other and the dialect, and also to explain the things clearly and make sure they understand, because it's very important for the client to understand you, otherwise you are not making it clear. And also use less jargons, use simple words, and make it as easy as possible. But take your time, don't rush it. Make sure that you personally understand before interpreting anything. If you didn't understand, then you can't interpret anything properly. And don't pressurize the client, because those clients are young people who've been through a lot throughout their journeys to the United Kingdom. Therefore, they might not be able to remember everything. Another skills needed is listening skills. That you need to listen carefully to what they say. Therefore, interpret exactly what they say and no more, no less, because the more you are putting from your own side is not helping the clients, but it might put the whole age assessment in danger and make a big difference in their life. Therefore, try to do your best in not interfering with what they say by interpreting exactly and properly to the best of your knowledge. Your role as an interpreter is there to help convey the meanings, nothing else. Therefore, leave the judgment, the decision for the caseworkers or the social workers or the lawyers you are working with. The best of your knowledge is that to do your best helping the clients, and sometimes the differences in the culture you need to interpret and make sure that both sides are understanding. Otherwise, your role, it will be a weapon against the client you are interpreting for. Thank you.
Thank you, Burhan, for sharing that experience with us, and I think also laying down a challenge to anybody who's involved in a professional capacity in age assessments about their roles and responsibilities for young people involved. I guess that moves us on to our next set of instructions from young people, which are around appropriate adults. And I need a bit of help on picking this, because I don't feel like appropriate adults is a kind of layperson's term. What do we mean by it?
So an appropriate adult is another adult who should be present in the age assessment sessions. And they're another person that came up in the discussions with young people about who they wanted to express their feelings and experiences about, because there'd been some very mixed experiences between the young people. So appropriate adults are there, they're independent from the local authority, and their role is to support the young person and advocate for them during the age assessment. They should be trained, experienced, and they need to know what their role is. They should be explaining to the young person at the start of the assessment who they are, what their role is, and ideally it will be someone the young person knows, but what came out a lot was that it wasn't someone that they were familiar with. So if you're not, then ideally you'd be able to meet them and introduce yourself before the session, and also have time before the session to be able to talk to the young person again and explain your role. So the purpose essentially is to make sure the assessment's taking place in a child-friendly manner, that the young person understands what's going on, and if there are any issues, you're able to speak up and advocate for them, or if it looks as though they need a break, you ask for a break, and just check in and make sure that on their welfare during the session, and also to take notes, which can be a really important role if it does come to an age dispute and a possible legal challenge in the end.
I suppose just listening to you explain that and having looked at the advice sheet, which maybe we could pull up now, I just thought it was interesting to reflect how some of the messages from young people around appropriate adults feed into broader conversations around guardianship. And yeah, the role of an adult on your side to look after your best interests. Could you just pick out some of the key messages from the advice sheet for appropriate adults?
Yeah, so the first one was just a general plea for the appropriate adult to just realise how important their role is in supporting the young person, and just making sure that, you know, everything in the age assessment is okay and that they're okay and able to engage. As I said, the other thing that came out was the fact that they're often not given the opportunity to choose who the appropriate adult is. And really they wanted to have someone there that they could trust and who they felt would advocate for them. So it's something really to think about when deciding who should be there at the age assessment sessions. Another thing was making clear who you are, what your role is, and what you are there for. Because something that comes up frequently is when you ask who was in the age assessment session, the young people will say, oh, there were 4 people, but I don't know who they were. So they actually had no idea if there was someone there and that person was there to support them through the whole process. The other thing was make notes. So as I said, that where we've received appropriate adult notes in legal challenges, they have sometimes been integral to making sure that there's a proper, clear, and sometimes verbatim note of what's happened. So it really helps the young person if they say, this is what happened to me, there's a note there that reflects it and backs them up. Support us and reassure us through the process. So it's just that thing of knowing that there's someone there looking out for you in your best interests, and that wasn't always happening in all of the sessions, even where there was an appropriate adult present. And look out for us in our best interests, ask us if we need a break, and please intervene if there's a problem. So it's really important that the appropriate adult feels confident and able to speak up for the young person. You know, some weren't aware who they were or what their role was because they weren't speaking up for them when they felt there was a problem.
There's been some really strong messages in those advice sheets for social workers, interpreters and appropriate adults. Were there any other professional roles that in the age assessment process that young people wanted to reach out to?
Yeah, so those social workers, interpreters and appropriate adults are the main people in the actual sessions themselves, and really came across as the people the young people wanted their experiences and feelings to be expressed to. But there are other really key people who are working with or supporting young people who have their ages disputed. And particularly important are foster carers or where someone's in supported lodgings, key workers. So they're the people who are sort of looking after their day-to-day interests and just there to support them and care for them. So they'll be a real key part in this young person's life in the UK, and really integral to supporting them if their age is disputed. And as I said, age assessments are supposed to be holistic, so all of the information that's available needs to be taken into consideration. And courts have placed, you know, great weight on views of foster carers because they're day in, day out, looking after this young person, getting to know them, observing them and their interactions and their behaviour. And we've had cases where foster carers' support for the young person has been absolutely vital, both in just generally supporting them day to day through this, you know, really difficult process, particularly if it goes to a legal challenge, but actually coming along to court, foster carers, former foster carers, family members, just supporting the young person, both day to day, but also in the court hearing. And those views, those supporting views have been really, really key, both in terms of the judge making decision and obviously for the young person themselves to know that these people who are looking after them are really believing in them and supporting them. And we have actually put together an advice sheet which is for foster carers and supported lodging staff previously, and that is on our website as well.
So I think we're going to get the chance now to speak to a foster carer, Halima, who's done a video clip for us about her experience of supporting young people who've had their ages disputed. And she also talks about the importance of interpreting, interestingly. So it's interesting to layer what she says with what Burhan's already shared with us. And listen out for, she's got such a confident, curious, proactive, challenging approach to the best things for her young people. So have a listen and see what you think.
My name's Halima Hussain. I'm a foster carer and I've been fostering for over 5 years. I've had the experience of fostering younger unaccompanied asylum seekers, and they have to go through the age assessment process. They've had many different experiences and it is a journey to the unknown for them. We have different cultural values and norms. Language is a main barrier for them, and when they're being age assessed, a lot of the times they're just being put on the spot and they're not in the right frame of mind. They're of an anxious disposition, and sometimes they get the question techniques wrong, especially when there's an interpreter over the phone, because they can't tune into their non-verbal communication, and they're just not in the right frame to give the right correct answers. And their lived experience throughout this process is very frightening for them, and this in a way determines their future, all upon that one interview. And it stipulates that we need 2 social workers present, we need an independent person present, and a lot of the times this is not possible. It all just depends on which authority these young people have come from and who's available to interview them. There is a team around these young people, but a lot of the times they're not able to access them at the time when they need them most, especially when they're going through the age assessment process. I had to actually, as a foster carer, being their voice and being their advocate for these young people, I had to challenge an age assessment. I disputed the fact that he was 23. They deemed him to be 23, and he used to say to me, I'm only 17. So I took this matter further with the appropriate help, and I did get a positive outcome. But if this was done correctly at the beginning of the age assessment process, then we would not have to endure all this turmoil, reflecting on their lived experiences from the there and then, bringing them to the here and now. And it was a very, very difficult time. When we're talking about age assessments, I believe as a foster carer that it's not all black and white. There's a lot of grey areas, and we need to be mindful of that. And hopefully, you know, we can get things better and make a difference, and it's all about raising awareness. So thank you.
Thank you, Halima, for sharing that. I think it's really inspirational. And I guess the last kind of group of professionals that it's probably worth flagging are legal professionals. So Laura, a little bit like yourself, you know, how do young people come into contact with solicitors and barristers, for example, through this?
Yeah, so apart from these fun sessions that I got to be part of to put together the guide, my usual role is obviously legal advice and representation for young people who are age disputed. So by the time they come to me, they've normally gone through the process and been deemed to be an adult. So then referred to me for advice about challenging that. So in brief, the first stage of the whole legal process and challenge, which we have set out, we charted in the group, and is set out in a flow chart in the guide, is that we put together what's called a letter before action, which sets out the challenges to the age assessment and the reasons why it's not considered lawful, and any new evidence that might be available, like supporting statements from people such as the foster carers, or if they've obtained any documents. If in response to this letter the local authority don't agree to accept the young person's age, then sometimes the legal challenge just has to be brought to court. So what has to be brought is something called a claim for judicial review. So it's a claim that's brought in the High Court, and there's quite a tight time frame for bringing it. So you have to bring a claim for judicial review as soon as possible and within 3 months. So any delay or bringing the claim out of time has to be justified and considered and accepted by a judge. So that for someone who has potentially been moved out of care, dispersed into adult accommodation somewhere else in the country where they've got no support links, often things, you know, don't happen that quickly, and it becomes a lot more complicated for the young person. So putting in an application, a claim for judicial review, At that stage, we put together all of the evidence that we've got so far, and we'll also get a witness statement from the young person, which has to be put together very carefully with their solicitor, and any other witness statements you might have, say from the foster carer or an English tutor. The first stage is normally that it will be, all of this paperwork will be considered by a judge, and the judge will decide essentially whether or not the claim is strong enough to then proceed to a final hearing. The case will then, if it goes to a final hearing, basically it's for a judge to make a final decision on age, listening to the evidence of a young person, and as I said, anyone else who's there to support them. So in cases we've had foster carers come along and give evidence as well. So all of those stages can be extremely lengthy, extremely traumatic, having to recount everything all over again for the statement. They may have already done it for the asylum solicitor, to the Home Office during the age assessment, and just have to wait many months, sometimes, you know, over a year for an actual decision to be made. And as we said, one of the key things that came out was the fact that they were missing out on so many things during this time. Even if they're in care, sometimes it's a real challenge to be able to get them into education or, you know, just the support that they should be entitled to. So as I said, at the session, we charted the process and we put a flow chart in the guide with the different possible outcomes at each stage, in the hope that it gives a sort of overview and helps young people who are going through the process to sort of understand the different stages and what to expect and what might happen.
I think we can hear now from another legal professional that that you work with. So we've got a video clip from Vijay Jagadesham, who's a barrister at Garden Court Chambers, who is going to explain a little bit about age assessment from his perspective and also the guide.
I become involved when the legal process needs to start, when we need to take the case to court to challenge the age assessment, and when the local authority refuses to change its mind. And that's after we've sent letters explaining their duties and what's gone wrong. And if they don't agree, then a court will have to decide. A court will have to decide for itself the age of that young person, doing the best it can by listening to the young person, by listening to the social workers, by reading any documents that the young person has, if they have any. Many do not. And by making a decision on what's called a balance of probabilities. So if there's a 51% chance that that young person is under 18, then the court will make that decision, also exercising what's called the benefit of the doubt. So if there's any doubt that person's under 18, then they'll be treated as under 18. As I say, I believe that the guide will be very helpful to all involved, and I hope avoid a need for age assessment challenges. The young person will hear the voices of those who've been through the very same process. They'll hopefully be more informed of what's going to happen, and also their rights in terms of challenging what's happening. And in terms of the professionals, it reminds them of their duties and what they need to do to protect that young person's best interests. And therefore, I believe that this is an invaluable and timely resource. And I believe that every young person and professional involved in the age assessment process should have it with them. Thank you. So
thanks to Vijay for his insights, suppose just as we move to wrapping up, Laura, I wonder if I could just put a final question to you, which is really what your hopes are for the guide and the work of young people in creating it, and also your hopes for the age assessment process as we go forward.
So I'm really hoping that this guide and the advice sheets and a lot of work that's gone into it by the young people to put it together, and all of the resources that we've got on the website are going to be really well received and shared around. I hope the guide itself, the aim of the guide is to help reassure other young people, others, that others have gone through this same process, help them understand, again, idea of, what might happen, what might be asked, what it might involve. But also the point of both the guide and the advice sheets is the hope that the professionals involved working with or supporting the young people, it gives them an understanding of how the process actually is for the young people, how it makes them feel, and maybe, something to think about and help guide the way that they carry out age assessments in their practice. So we all want children and young people to be treated as such and not put in harm's way. So the hope is, in everything that we do, that if we can improve the age assessment process and try and make it that bit better, that it's going to reduce the risk of adding to the trauma that these young people have already experienced quite significantly. So we do have the guide and the advice sheets in digital format at the moment, and we're hoping we will also be able to print and distribute hard copies once printers are open again, and have translated versions available as well.
Great. Thank you, Laura. Thank you for sharing your experience and your insight with us. Also just wanted to say thank you to our colleagues Max and Rivka, who've been dashing around behind the scenes making sure that this actually happened. Thank you to the people who provided video clips. So thank you Maria, to Burhan, to Halima and VJ, and to the young people whose audio clips we've been able to share. We've got one more to share with you, don't go anywhere yet. Thank you for the people who shared their audio clips and that much broader group of young people who are involved in producing the guide and the advice sheets. We really hope this launch has done some justice to your work in a way that felt safe and practical. We also wanted to say thank you to all our funders and supporters who enable us to work with young people. So in particular, Paul Hamlin Foundation and the Strategic Eagle Fund, and in particular to Freshfields and the work that they've done with their pro bono service to make this guide happen. And I guess thank you very much, folks, to you guys for joining us. As Laura said, you can find the guide and all the materials on our website, which is www.gmiau.org. All the links are there. You'll also be able to find and access all the video clips, the audio clips, and there's a series of blogs that we've been putting out over the last couple of weeks that all talk about age assessment from different perspectives. So if you haven't seen those already, go and have a look at them on the website. And if you follow us on Twitter, which is at GMIAU, then there'll be commentary on the launch, as well as signposting to the other materials. So you can get in touch with us to discuss age assessments, and if you need to make a referral, all that information is on our website. And like I said, we're going to finish in the best way possible, which is by hearing from another young person who had their age disputed, but thankfully it was accepted after a legal challenge. So thank you for joining us for the launch. We hope the advice sheets and the guide will be useful, and please do help us do justice to the courage and determination of the young people who produce them by helping us share them widely. So thanks very much, and I'll leave you with the voice of a young person who wanted to tell his story with you.
When they asked me about my age, they asked me a lot of questions. When they refused my age, I I was worried and I was angry because the home office took me go out. I lived in Liverpool for weeks and lived in Rockdale 1 week. I felt stressed and sometimes I cried. I miss a lot of things and I miss my family and my country. When I lived with Portugal, she said to my social worker, I am 20 years old, I look like older. Yeah, I said in Vietnam, I didn't go to school and I was born in a poor family. I have to work every day to earn money to eat. Everybody didn't help me anything, so I look like older than my friend or anybody. Then I have solicitor and teacher and Panado and group 141 help me. So they were accepted my aid. I was happy that I never forget them to help me, and thank you everyone for helping me. Now I can live in England forever, and I hope to get a good job here. And I'm happy because I have met a lot of people from a lot of countries, and I have met a lot of friends in England.
Okay, thanks very much, folks.